All right, guys, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Charlie McGrath on this second hour on the 23rd day of April, Tuesday. Joining me now, Greg Mannarino, a regular on the program. We're going to break down a little bit of what's going on in the markets lately, the fear that's out there, do we have some volatility back in it? Greg, give us your websites again real quick. Give us which one you want us to visit and tell us a little bit about your new site before we start rolling here.
Sure. I do a business day market report, as you well know, on YouTube. You can easily find that. Just go to GregoryMannarino.com or just put my name in anywhere on the web, and I'm sure you'll find it. That would probably be the easiest way for someone to find me. I have a lot of stuff going on, as you know, publications. I have a free website dedicated to traders. I have a new publication dedicated to get people out of debt. You know those commercials that you see on TV? They say, oh, no, call us right now. We're going to get you out of debt. Well, I break it down to 20 pages, and I'm offering it for free to anybody who wants to download it. Just go to lulu.com, and the name of the book is Become Debt Free Now. And you can get it for zero money. And I want to put these people out of business. I'm telling you, because there's one thing I can't stand is people taking advantage of other people. So every one of these sites out there that are promising people debt relief, well, I'm going to tell you how to do it. I'm going to show you step by step, and it's free.
Hey, I know I want to talk about other things here, but that's very interesting to me. Tell me, these folks that are putting these commercials on, because there's a lot of people in debt. I mean, the personal debt is starting to increase again, and everybody's getting the. You see the almost a subprime type of investing coming back. You see banks that are willing to lend 140% of equity. You see refinance every other month. You see credit card limits going up. So people are starting to jump back into the debt boat after we've seen a real decrease in the last several years and starting to go the other way. It was my understanding most of these institutions that advertise, right? Most of these companies that advertise, I envision a boiler room where they're really working for a lot of these credit card companies or a lot of these banks. You end up using them, and regardless of what anybody says, your credit rating, if you care about that, is going to be absolutely eviscerated one way or another if you're doing your personal default on some of these loans. But they are very, very, very much predatory, are they not? These people are spending millions of dollars to advertise.
Oh, they are. But let me just back up a minute. These companies that advertise debt relief, if you notice, the first thing they say is if you have $10,000 or more in credit card debt, there's a reason for that. Because first of all, these companies, believe it or not, are somewhat legitimate, and they will get you out of debt. But what they won't tell people is there's all kinds of hidden fees associated with this. And anyone can do it. It's the most simple thing to get out of unsecured debt. And people will not believe it. And I've gotten thousands upon thousands of downloads already, and I've heard from a lot of people say, Greg, this is incredible. And it really is. It just breaks it all down, how people can... Well, it breaks down the whole process of how this money is borrowed into existence, how it never really existed, quote unquote, in the first place, and how these institutions really don't care whether you pay them back or not. Because what people don't understand is when let's say someone wants to take out a loan, a personal loan or an unsecured loan, whatever, depending on their credit score, and this is why credit scoring, you were referring to that just a moment. We're going to talk about that too. It costs the lender a certain amount to insure that loan. Every time a loan is created, it's insured by someone else. It's called a credit default swap. Okay? Mm-hmm. So they don't care if you pay them back or not because someone else owns a loan. And then that's insured, and that's insured. It's a whole big scam. It's really the truth. So the lender really doesn't care whether or not you pay this money back. It sounds ridiculous, but if you don't pay the money back, they don't lose a dime anyway.
Right.
They just tend to break even. Would they prefer you pay them back? Of course they would, because then they'll make a profit as opposed to breaking even. So really, just going back to these institutions, with the $10,000 or more in debt, doesn't matter how much debt you have. You could have $1,000, $2,000. What do we know? America is the biggest debtor nation in the history of the world on a macro scale, and we're never going to pay that debt back, period. So on the little guy on the totem pole, the same thing. The American citizens are the most indebted of any civilized nation. It's pathetic. And what's going on here? Well, we're hearing about consumer credit is being extended. Really? So what does that mean? So the American people are getting more buried under a mountain of debt that can't be paid back, period.
Right.
it's criminal for our policymakers to be doing this. But just going back to fixing your credit, let me explain something to you. And the people don't realize how easy it is to fix that. The credit reporting agencies, they don't care if the information on your report is accurate. They just want to gather information and then sell that information to everyone. So you can dispute all these things. It's a process, but it's very simple. Anyone who has unsecured debt can get out from under it with ease and fix their credit with ease. A big secret, but the secret is out, everyone. And I'm urging you to download my little brief, 20 pages. It's free. You got nothing to lose. Lulu.com. Become debt free now. Get your copy and get yourself out of debt. Period. The end. Starting right now.
All right. Here's what we're gonna do. I'll after the program, I'll download that, and then we'll get you on here next month, and we'll talk. We'll talk about the booklet. How's that sound?
That sounds fine.
Great. You're tired, aren't you, buddy?
This topic of debt, it bothers me so much. It hurts me to the core of my being how this whole system is rigged, how it's all put together, how it's designed to create debtors and debt slaves. It's absurd. So this gets under my skin more than anything else because it's the greatest detriment towards people becoming wealthy. Wealthy people do not borrow into oblivion. They don't lease things, and they don't rent. Most people rent, lease, and borrow their way into oblivion. Rich people don't do that. They own things. That's the difference here, and it's the mentality that you have to change. But you have to understand how the system works. And that's what I tried to do with my little brief here. I say, listen, you don't need to be a debt slave. You do not have to even pay back this money, even if you can. It's just crazy, honestly, God.
And while you were talking there, just that little, since I stopped talking and you started talking, I'm looking at nationaldebtclock.org, and it's just now $10,000 more in credit card debt. And 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, that number was coming down. People were still, that number was starting to fall ever since 2007, 2008. Sure. And now it's turned the corner. It's going back up again. So
yeah, whose fault is this? It's the Federal Reserve. They're making the cheap money available to everyone. People say, hey, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to borrow more money and blah, 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 and bury myself in debt. I worry about paying it back later. It's the system is being reinflated. This debt problem is epic on a macro scale, on a micro scale as well. People are crushing themselves. Don't buy into this. It's amazing how many people do, and they live off of credit like this. And it's not a good thing. It's the number one surefire way to stay broke for life. If that's your goal, then go out and keep on borrowing. But if you want to become wealthy, if you want to get out of this game, then just don't play their game.
And we talked about that a little bit in the last hour, with about a minute to go before we have our first break here. But we talked about how the people in this country, we're seeing societal implosion, right? The suicide is now the leading cause of death and injury. More and more people on pharmaceuticals. 1 out of 4 women are taking an antidepressant. Children too. Children too.
It's a nation of people that are being shoved on drugs and being pushed into debt. Think about it. It's embarrassing. And who's pushing this forward? It's our policymakers. They've lost control. You know this, Charlie. I know this. I'm sure most of your listeners know this. This is not the United States of America. This is the United States of corporate America. And their agenda is what they're trying to shove down everyone's throat, and it's working for them. We got to get people to think outside the box.
No doubt about it. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with the markets, right? Since the last time we were on, or I had you on rather, we had gold and silver. Oh man, I mean, just taking a beating, an absolute throttling. Now, what I find interesting is if we look back to 2011, gold took a 20% hit in a short amount of time. And after that, we had a European debt crisis that was bad, that got to really bad, and we had the central bank intervention. If we look before that, the last time we'd seen such a major routing in gold was 2008, and we all know what happened in September. That happened in July 2008. In September 2008, we had the so-called economic crisis that we've been all living in ever since then. Greg Mannarino, talk about that on the backside of this break. We'll do this break. We'll be right back. with more Wide Awake News Radio. Please hang tight. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absol Welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Charlie McGrath, Greg Mannarino. We talked about all kinds of things. As Gary said, we solved a bunch of problems during the break, and we have to try to remember where we left off. But I do remember because gold, silver, precious metals, people are freaking out. And Greg, I know you're going to say you're stacking because we have $23 silver. But I find it interesting the last couple times in recent history that we've seen gold and silver take a big plunge. There's been, a quick decline, 20% or more. It's come shortly after a critical event, a crisis event in the financial industry, in the markets, has occurred shortly after that. What's your take on what's going on with precious metals in the markets? Let's talk about this for the next 40 minutes.
Sure. This is something I've been talking about almost since I started. I outlined this in my book, The Politics of Money. What we're seeing now is a disconnect between this paper market that they call gold and silver and the actual physical market. There are shortages that are appearing right now. Anyone can research this. I've called these companies myself to say, hey, what's going on with your supply of silver? Most of these companies are down over 50%, and they're selling like mad. So what do we know is going on here? For quite a while now, we've seen the physical market regarding gold and silver, reaching incredible highs. Countries are requiring it. Governments are requiring this. The richest people are requiring it. Meanwhile, the paper markets have been falling off a cliff. What people need to understand, the paper markets regarding gold and silver, they're not real. There's no price discovery here. It's a mechanism solely to manipulate the price of these metals. Now, what happened recently, if anyone was really paying attention, was the acceleration of the decline in the price regarding the paper market happened overseas. It started here and accelerated overseas in the overnight markets. I think there's a lot of things going on here. I think that the holders outside the country are holding this paper. They were just dumping it because they want to manipulate the market down because they want to cause shortages. It sounds insane, but think about it. People have been acquiring this countries, governments, and everything. If they cause shortages, which are going to happen, we're already seeing it. What is that going to do to the physical price of the actual metals? They're going to go to the moon. I still stick, to my targets on these that I outlined in my book and why. Gold is going to near $8,000 an ounce. Silver is going between $300 and $500 an ounce. The physical stuff, I don't care what happens to the paper market. The paper market could go to zero, but that doesn't mean the actual metals are worth nothing. It's a scam, and I think this may play out to be a black swan event because once people realize that the paper money is becoming more and more worthless. We see this. I don't care what the CPI might be or anything like that. It's about the purchasing power. Look, we all go shopping. They're trying to tell us there's no inflation. Are they crazy? I mean, seriously. We're already seeing this. Food inflation. Everything is shrinking. Your packages. You go to the store. Yeah, a bar of soap used to be, 4 ounces. Now it's 3 ounces. Same price or it's higher. Whatever it might be. So this whole thing is unfolding more and more rapidly, and it's with the Federal Reserve really in collusion with the investment banks and everything. It's just created a distorted reality, and that's really the main thing that people need to realize here. And it all comes down to the main topic that you and I were talking about is debt. We've borrowed from the future to live a better now. It literally created an alternate reality that would not have been if we didn't have access to credit. That bill is becoming due, period. And when people realize that this paper money scheme is ending, they're going to flock into real assets. And I've been telling people to get into hard assets since I started doing this. And they're going to, if people don't act now and get themselves angled in as far as they can with regard to the precious metals, more specifically silver, they're going to wish they did. Everyone looks back on their life and they say, hey, I wish I would have acted on this and I wish I would have acted on that. If you do not act and get yourself into physical assets now and get out of this paper Ponzi scheme, you're in a lot of trouble. I don't care how much cash wealth you have. When this thing comes apart,
there's a theory out there, a notion out there that when we have, if this was a black swan event that leads to a trigger, that leads to a severe economic crisis, that there'll be a window of opportunity where cash will still be king. Where and I've heard some people say it's going to be 6 months or so until the realization that the fiat currency is on the way out, but cash will still be king. People will still be accepting it. People will still try to flock to the dollar as a world reserve currency or a store of wealth or a safe haven. Do you buy into that, or do you? I can see that argument being made, and I can also realize that we could be facing an event at some point in the future that is far worse than anything we've experienced in the past. Don't answer that yet because we got a break coming up here. But,
all right, because I want to talk about this. It's important.
Okay. We'll get up. We'll pick up with that topic on the backside. Will there be a window of opportunity, or are we looking at a collapse coming that is going to be very certain and very shocking and very rapid? We'll be right back with Greg Mannarino and more Wide Awake News Radio. Please hang tight. All right, guys, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Greg Mannarino is our guest. And I posed a question to you before the break, and I see Gary pulled a question out of chat from Meat Dog, and we'll get to that here in just a second. But I did pose a question to you before the break about individuals I've heard speak to cash is king theory, where cash is going to be king for a certain period of time when we go into a severe economic crisis a la 2008 or even worse. There's other theories out there, kind of the more ones I subscribe to, that when the reality hits of where we are as a planet in debt, like you said, never before in the history of man have we experienced any kind of debt loads like this. When this realization comes to the forefront, I think it's going to be by design. It's going to be a complete shakeup of everything, and it isn't going to be something that look, we saw what happened today with the flash crash, right? Flash trading, this high frequency trading. We could go from normal to insane overnight or even sooner. So I'm kind of leaning to the point that when the ultimate realization and ultimate collapse occurs, it's going to be very violent and it's going to be very fast. But what is your take on that?
I agree with you, but I think the initial knee-jerk, just because people don't know any better, when this thing first starts to really come apart, I think you will see a run to the dollar, because it's like that run home to mommy thing. People, unfortunately, they believe, the cash is king, the U.S. dollar is almighty, blah, blah, blah. But what they're not realizing is this next crash here is a crisis of currency. So initially, you're going to see this rush into the dollar. You're going to see probably yields drop. And then all of a sudden, it's going to go completely the other way extremely rapidly, because it's, again, crisis of currency. And the kicker to this is the Fed will be powerless. What are they going to do? Print more of it? No, that's the problem. What are they going to do? Contract the money supply? No, no one's going to want to buy the bonds. So they're dead. Zero. They were absolutely powerless, and this thing will just come apart with no way to stop it. None, unless they want price controls. They're going to try that. These are all coming. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, sure. It's already happened, right? I mean, we can look. Yeah. Cyprus, right? Cyprus, the banks still aren't open. You can still draw 300 euros or whatever the case may be. But yeah, I agree. I mean, there's going to be, pandemonium. It's probably a word that's overused, but seriously, there's going to be a freak out moment when the realization that you're not going to, you plug your finger into the dam and stop the bleeding. It's going to hit hard and furious. I think it's ironic, or maybe not, that Bernanke's floating the notion that he's done as Federal Reserve Chair. I don't know if you've seen that recently or not.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I think what's going to, as this thing does move forward here, we're going to see a new mania in metals, and it's going to be incredible. People are going to be scrambling to get into hard assets, and I see there's a question about ammunition here. I think people are going to be scrambling to ammunition as well.
Well, here's a question, and I'll go ahead and ask you. This is from Meat Dog 17. Do we have 16 other Meat Dogs 17? 16 other meat. Question for Greg. How does Greg feel about the value of ammunition versus precious metals in the short and long term? It's a good question.
That's a great question. We all need to have ammunition, no doubt about it. We all need to have several things that we need to have. The number one thing we need to realize is the first order of business isn't about finance. It's about survival. Survival, period. So we need to have a shelter. We need to have food. We need to have a way to defend ourselves, and maybe even a getaway plan. And then everything else comes secondary. You want to worry about protecting your wealth. You want to worry about building your wealth. Yeah, these are important, but nothing is more important than, realizing, again, first order of business is survival. And I've been over this so many times. I know I pretty much talk about finance all the time, and that's where my head is kind of wired.
Right.
But I understand, believe me, that it's super important to be able to realize that as this unfolds, we are going to see a social unrest that it's going to be biblical. I mean, I'm not a religious guy, honestly, but if this is going to be biblical as this unfolds, I'm absolutely sure of it. Social unrest in the United States, martial law, we're already starting to see discord here. We have bombings, we have shootings. This is not going to improve, and our policymakers realize this. This is why the police have been militarized in every state in the union. This is why we're going to have drones, or maybe have drones flying overhead listening to this show right now.
No, there's no doubt about it. This is going into some fusion center somewhere, and these things that you're talking about, the bombing did occur, but shortly after that, martial law occurred.
It did. Absolutely. Yeah. We're closing down the city, everyone. Forget about it. You can't leave your house. I understand it was a dire situation.
Whatever. 19-year-old kid. Honestly, in the scale of dire situations.
Exactly.
Come on.
I know, exactly. I mean, yes, if you put it into that perspective, you're absolutely right. I think it was not called for in there. I think it's almost like a test. They want to see, again, what they can do, what they can get away with, because that's what they always do. This whole thing in Cyprus, we know what this was. Test bed, period. This is not going to end over there. We're going to get Cyprus here. And the people in Cyprus, they don't have their money. They still, the banks are still holding it hostage. They're holding the people hostage, like you said. Oh, you can have a little bit at a time, but you can't have it all. It's not good here. Go ahead.
Let's get into. I mean, you're in these markets. You talk to these guys all the time, every day, right? This is how you're making your living. Rumbles of 2007. We've been talking about it. I've been talking about it for nearly 6 months now. The things that have occurred. Excuse me. The things that have occurred that occurred in 2007, going into 2008. We're seeing these same things again. I mean, if you were going to put, I know you don't like to do predictions on timing and all that, but I mean, it sure seems like what is the tactic that will be used in order to try to stave off financial destitution, right? Mm. Because, I mean, how many more tricks can they pull out of their sleeve? How many more things can be done? How many more books can be cooked? And how long can this game be played out? I mean, in your estimation, are we seeing something shock to our markets, the financial system, in the next 6 months to a year?
To really put a finger on it is very difficult, but I think so. Let me just say this, and it's something I went over today in one of my my market report video from earlier in the day. What people need to realize is this, and you hear a lot of people on the mainstream media saying, "Oh, stocks are cheap, stocks are cheap." Based on what? Let me put a perspective on this that I think everyone can understand. Just prior to the crash, 2007, 2008, the market was actually a little bit lower than it is right now, the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Meanwhile, GDP was twice what we have now. Unemployment was about half what we have now, and incomes are lower now. But the market is higher than it was then. So what people need to realize is when in any asset, and we're talking about the market as a whole, rises above a level that economic activity or incomes dictate, we're in a bubble. So forget about what these mainstream people are talking about. The stocks are not cheap and they are in a bubble. So knowing that they are in a bubble, and a bubble can burst rapidly at any moment.
And by definition, when it does burst, rapid is the
exactly. And you hear so many people saying, "Oh, it's going to be a slow burn." Really? How is it going to be a slow burn? And look back on history, every single bubble, boom, down the toilet, and that's how this is going to end too. But I tell people, forget about what's going on in the equity markets. You got to watch the bond market because that's where the real fire is. Whoa.
You all right, buddy?
Yeah,
I thought a bubble burst over there.
Little bubble burst. Okay, exactly. But
the bond market.
the
Continue.
real action is exactly. But what's going on here? And think about this. We just found out that the European economy is slowing down and China's slowing down, and we keep getting earnings reports that are coming in poorly. They're all pretty much, well, not all. 55% of the companies that are reported are missing on their top line or their revenue, but their bottom line or their earnings per share, well, you know what? That's coming in pretty good. Interesting concept. How is that happening? Let's see. You want to go over that after the break?
No, yeah, the break. We'll be back with Greg Mannarino and more Wide Awake News Radio in just a minute. Hang tight. All right, welcome back to the final segment of Wide Awake News Radio tonight on this 23rd day of April, Tuesday. Greg Mannarino, we're continuing to talk during the break about gold and silver, and I forgot where we left off even. What were we talking about?
I know where we were. I remember.
Okay, take it over. Take it over.
Yeah, you know, we were talking about how, well, just for example, we saw the market rise today about 152 points. We just found out yesterday, officially, once again, Europe is slowing down. China is slowing down. Earnings are coming in poorly. Again, they're missing their top line. Over 55% of the companies that are reporting missing their top line, meaning their revenue. Their bottom line, their earnings per share. Their earnings per share is a joke because it's manipulated. But we know for a fact that these companies are buying back their own stock. This is what's driving the market to a large degree. So if they're buying back their own stock, pushing their stock higher, it affects the earnings per share. So forget about earnings per share. It's a joke. But understand, we know now, okay, officially once again, Europe is slowing down. China is slowing down. Earnings are not coming in good. The bottom line is being manipulated, but the market's rising. Why? Because there's no bad news anymore. The Federal Reserve, who's been front-running the market, status post to crash, is going to backstop anything. So bad news has now become good news.
Yeah, that makes sense because, you know, and this term hasn't been said for quite some time, since 2008. But what was it? Moral hazard. Remember moral hazard? That we started talking about that during the bailout period. Well, this is it. This is it, folks. This is it. You can have China, the new largest manufacturer in the world, one of the largest economies in the world, slowing down. You can have Europe officially in recession. So what? Who cares? You can have earnings missing big. Who cares? It doesn't matter. The Federal Reserve is going to step in, and what are they at? $40 billion a month at this point, over $1 trillion a year. Nobody can fail. Nobody can fail in these companies. So why not go out and buy your own stock, drive everything up? There is nothing to worry about, and it just makes the fall that much harder, does it not, Greg?
It does, by huge amounts. But think about this. And I was talking to Greg Hunter about this. He came up with this theory, and I have to give him credit for it. What he said to me, he said, Greg, the Fed's buying $45 billion a month of these mortgage-backed securities from these institutions. What are they doing with the money? Well, guess what? They're buying back their own stock. They're affecting their earnings per share. It's incredible.
Yeah.
But yes, absolutely. All this is doing, all this money printing, all this everything is just hyper-inflating the bubble in debt. And that's the biggest problem, because that bubble, that is the bubble that we all need to worry about. Again, we cannot pay back that cash. It's monies that we've borrowed from the future to live a better now. When that bill becomes due in full, we can't pay it back. So resources are going to become scarce, just like gold and silver now. They're going to become scarce, but this is going to accelerate to commodities all over the place. People are going to starve to death. That's the truth. And this is where it's going to lead into a global collapse and a calamity, again, of the biblical proportions. I like to use that term, even though I'm not a religious guy. Just like it sounds.
Well, but yeah, I do too, because I think it's very apropos for where we're sitting. 7 billion people. Basically, the world is expanded on fiat, on debt, right?
100%.
And it's.
Look,
yeah,
you know what, I'm gonna show you something if I can find this real quick here.
It's just an M1 Garand?
No, not an M1 Garand, dude. I can show you that too. But let me just show this to you, your listeners, if I can find this.
Yeah, you look for it, but I'll keep going with my little story. Go ahead.
Go on.
Well, I was gonna say, here we are. We live in a world that is commodity driven, energy driven, overpopulated. I don't know if we're overpopulated, but certainly we've seen an explosion in population. Go ahead.
Exactly. And why did that happen? That became because of this reason. This is page 152 in my book, The Politics of Money. Look at this bottom chart. You see that little nick there?
Yeah.
That's 1971 where we officially went off of a gold standard. Then we started borrowing money into oblivion. Look at the way this is population. I'm sorry, how it has boomed since that. Now look at the debt. Same mark in the same place. 1971. Look how the debt exploded. It almost went up exactly the same. Can you see that?
I can see
So
it. Yeah.
So when the debt bubble bursts here, that's going to cause a correction here in the population. And we're going to talk about tens of millions of people are going to die. Debt bubble burst, which it will, 100%. How do we know that? Because every single economic and financial bubble has burst before it. This one will burst. It's going to cause more harm than a nuclear exchange to the human race. There's no doubt about it. Well, people
and could possibly lead to the aforementioned nuclear exchange. I mean, it could lead to that.
Oh, there's war. There's definitely war going to become of this. Social unrest is going to lead to regional wars and every other thing. It's just going to explode. Again, we went to
a scramble for remaining resources, a scramble for remaining easily accessible resources, a scramble for geopolitical positioning. I mean, all of this happens in the guise of carnage, of collapse, right? And for those of you who are on Justin TV and did see him show those graphs, one is the population growth as of 1971, and the other is debt, but they're both hockey sticks straight up.
At the same time, in tandem.
Yeah. In tandem, yeah. And a lot of people tie that to that's the petrodollar. That's when we no longer, when the U.S. reserve or the U.S. dollar became the world reserve currency based on the fact that oil was traded in it. And, we saw a massive expansion of population along with debt. And when it all comes crashing down, it's going to come down together.
It's going to come down together, exactly. And that's what scares me the most. That's what I tell everyone. This is not just a financial issue. This is an issue that has to relate to human life. I don't think many people talk about it in that context, but you can't talk about one without understanding the other. And
so what do you I don't know if we got into time frames and all that. I mean, is this something, when that pops on that debt bubble, right? Because I'm with you. That's the number one. We might see bubbles pop here and there before. Yeah, nothing like the sovereign debt bubble that's going to be unleashed on this world. But I mean, can you see another 5 years of this? Another 10 years? What are your thoughts? What's your gut feeling?
That far. I don't think it's going that far for a lot of reasons. If you look at the interest that has to be paid on the debt, we already can't do it. They're going to be forcing austerity on the people here in the United States through taxation and every other kind of mechanism that you can think about to try to stave this off as much as possible. They can push this off, and bubbles can be hyper and super inflated. We're already hyperinflated. And there's a mechanism to this. It's the truth. The more mass that they can put in the debt bubble, the more cash is going to be made on the other side of this. Because when the debt bubble bursts, people are going to make more money than anyone can imagine. And who are those people? The people that are holding real assets. This is why the central banks of the world, by holding gold and by holding silver, what you're doing, in effect, is betting against the debt. You're betting against the debt. You're taking the short end of the trade is what you're really doing. Every transaction, whether it's debt or whatever, has two sides. There's a winner and there's a loser. If you bet against this debt, by betting against the debt, you're making the most sure bet in the history of your life, in the history of the world. And you bet against that debt by holding hard assets. That's the truth. People don't understand that. They don't get the concept that that's really why we're holding gold and we're holding silver. Yes, it doesn't pay a dividend. Yes, it doesn't report earnings. But it doesn't matter because we're using gold and silver to bet against this gargantuan bubble in debt. When the debt bubble bursts, these hard assets are going to skyrocket to heights where people are not going to believe. Because why? They're based in dollars. And as the dollar value becomes worth less and less and less and less and less, these are going to go up and up and up and up.
Well, yeah, and as physical becomes harder to find, even with suppression, there was a lot of theory. Yeah, there was a lot of theory when that big 10%. I was talking about the break, the 10% day on silver, which was phenomenal. I mean, even through the collapse of 2008 in the markets, we never saw any market fall that much in one day, 10%. It was an incredible thing to witness. But there was a theory there. Well, not a theory. Greg Hunter was on the program shortly after that talking about the incredible number of contracts that hit the market that day, and why would people be dumping these paper contracts in order just to kill the value of the contracts that they're holding themselves? It almost seems that the timing of these massive pullbacks in precious metals and the soon after financial shock waves that occur are always seem to be timed, because they know these shock waves are coming. They know they need to suppress or at least make look unattractive the flee to the real safe haven of precious metals.
My take is this: these institutions that manipulate the markets regarding the metals, they're not stupid. So for this to happen, it had to be engineered. Nothing happens like this by accident. It doesn't. So with that in mind, I am of the opinion that they're deliberately trying to push up the price with regard to the actual metals. That's what I believe.
And so push down. This is the take I have.
That's right. By getting rid of the paper, they're forcing shortages, because miners are not going to mine at these rates. Right now, at these levels, miners are losing money, so they're not going to mine. With that in mind, there's going to be shortages, and what's going to happen to the price based in dollars of these assets? Boink, up.
Yeah.
And again, these are not stupid people. They understand what they're doing. So this had to have been done on purpose, like everything else, like the hyperinflating of the debt, why they're trying to get people, keep them in debt, because money has to be borrowed into existence to allow this economic system to work. If it's not consistently borrowed into existence, it's over.
Yeah, well, and I guess that's a big question, is when, when, not if.
It's not too far off. That I can say. Can't put a finger on it, but it's not that too far off. People need to think about it.
Tell us about, I think we have less than a minute left. Tell us about your website. Give us some websites and some things to look for Greg Mannarino.
Sure. I urge people to, number one, friend me on Facebook. Anyone, I would never turn anyone down. We can start a dialogue. Also, find me on YouTube, Gregory Mannarino. I do a business day market report. I go over all this stuff 5 days a week, sometimes twice a day. I did 2 videos the other day when I found out that the Chinese gold exchange.
Greg Mannarino, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming on here. Seriously, I'm going to download that. I'm going to download your booklet. Give me the address on that again.
Just go to lulu.com. It's titled to Become
Debt Free.
Become Debt Free Now, yeah.
All right, man. Well, I'm going to read that, and then we'll get you on next month or sooner, and we'll talk about your work there and the other great works that you do, guys. Please visit his sites. Just go to, if you don't know where to go, just go to any search engine, Greg Mannarino. It'll take you to all of his work. A lot of good information coming out of this guy. So support him how you can. All right, guys. Stay tuned for Jeff Rentz, because he is coming up next tomorrow night. Sherry Edwards is going to analyze some video clips of recent events, and I think everybody knows where we're going there. And then we're going to have, I believe, Adrian Salbuche is coming on hour number 2. All right, enjoy Jeff. He's coming up next. Have a good night. Peace.